We're going to talk about cannabis with Associate Professor Thomas Lundqvist at Lund University in Sweden. In an article in Sweden's biggest daily newspaper, Dagens Nyheter, today, Professor Lundqvist expresses concerns about how cannabis interferes with the development of the young brain. Good afternoon, or rather good evening to you, Professor Lundqvist.
Thank you.
In this article, you state that cannabis interferes with the development of the teenage brain and that the effects could be potentially permanent. This sounds, of course, especially worrying, since you also say that 99% of the users start using cannabis in their mid-teens. Could you please elaborate on your concerns?
I will do my very best. We have a rather big pile of research on adult cannabis users, and they have been subject to more or less sophisticated interviews concerning cognitive functioning and how they improve when they quit cannabis when they are 25 years of age, 35 years of age, and so on. And there has been a paucity on more sophisticated research on focused problems like executive functioning. About 10 to 15 years ago, more like 10 years ago, the brain imaging technique was developed, and we had a very nice area of problems to solve. For example, what kind of area should we use? When shall we do it at the acute state or the chronic state of cannabis? Or when should, for how many days, the washout period, and so on. And this discussion and this debate has been ongoing. And at the same time, the knowledge of the growing from teenage brain to adult brain has been obvious, more or less like Cruz has been described in his studies, how the changes in executive function develops during the teenage years, and what kind of areas that develop first, and how you in your late teenage years develop more social skills that you don't have before. And during that discussion, the brain imaging technique looked at those specific areas, and they have mapped the brain in frontal areas, in temporal areas, and occipital areas, and so on, and different aspects of frontal areas, and in the deep of the brain, in the depth of the brain. So altogether, the puzzle was creating a picture that something is happening. So the designs of the brain imaging studies were more and more, become more and more sophisticated. And therefore, we could look at the change when you are a normal teenager and compare to cannabis smoking teenager. And I would like to emphasize that we are still looking at the people who are smoking every day. We are not in that position that we can say if you smoke once a week or once a month or once every 6 weeks. We don't have that kind of results yet to look at it. We have one point, and that is when you use it regularly, once a day or at least 3 times a day. So what we can find is that that part of brain that will develop after 14, 15 years of age, up to 25, suffers from the interaction with the cannabinoids, in that sense that you don't create a big density of receptors.
Mm-hmm.
If you are opposed to a social environment, you are also developing your skills in discussing and arguing and create your own self-confidence and self-knowledge. And that means that you put the experience that you get from these arguments into a special memory chamber. And in this chamber, you keep your reminiscence from your teenage years. So what we found through the brain imaging studies was that those who have been using regularly from 15 to 16 years of age up to 23 do not collect episodic memory. That means memories of self-knowledge in specific positions. So your period of teenage years are empty on real emotional memories. Of course, you remember when you were stoned, or when maybe when you're not stoned, you will remember. So there is two things, or two aspects of these. The one is that you don't mature in the physical structure of the brain, and you don't enhance your skills because you are not in a context of social environment where you are opposed to people who have other notions and other views of what you are discussing, so you compete in a competition. The whole teenage development is a competition. You need to be very eager to develop, and that's why we have the school. So if you don't attend the school, you will not be triggered to do the very best of what you are able to produce. So if you go on beyond 23, 24 years of age, smoking cannabis on a regular basis, you will find it's difficult to adjust to society because you don't develop the skills to adjust, so you don't know that you have to adjust. What you do is that you imitate what other people do. So it looks like you're adjusting, but you only feel an emptiness and detachment to the society. You can get there, of course, through other paths in life, but this is one through cannabis. So what we have found up to date is that create a brain which is slow in elaboration. You need to be aware of that you are slow in the elaboration or concentration to be able to cope with the down-regulated activity in your brain. Some are able to handle that, but others are not. And we are not there yet that we can say that you will have no problem, you will have a big problem. This is still to find out.
Now, we just had a look at this Dagens Nyheter, the comment section, and so far about 540 comments have been posted, and a majority of them obviously think that cannabis is no big deal. So are they wrong or what?
The problem is that we are not there yet that we can say which dose or how many times you have to smoke every day or every week or every. So when you have smoked, let's say, 3 times one week and 2 times next week, and then you don't smoke for a couple of weeks, and then that is something different, because then you don't have the impact of the cannabinoids on the human evolution all the time. So they can be right, they can be wrong. The other problem is that you cannot rely on their own introspectivity, because one of the first skills that you lose is to reflect upon yourself in a social setting.
Well, if we leave the comments and turn to the scientific community, would you say that there is a consensus within the scientific community regarding the cannabis-induced interference in the developed brain, or are there many differences within the community where you are active?
In the research community, it's a standard that you always criticize when you get some results, and then you have to argue, and they argue back. We do it on basis on science and available studies. We do not act on anecdotal history of reflection of one person or two. So far we can say that there is a very good consensus of the hazardous effect of cannabinoids on the human cognitive functioning. We are, however, not there yet that we can say at what doses will it become sincere and hurting you. But we can also say that when you start before you are 17, there is a higher risk that you develop deviant behavior in brain activity. If you start when you're 22 or 24, there will probably be not be that the same picture of deviant brain activity.
Well, considering what you've said so far, what about then legalization of cannabis that has been proposed primarily, well, anyway, it started in the United States and is spreading to other countries as well, that it would be to get better control of the situation, that legalization would be a possible step forward. Would you agree with that?
Well, as a scientist, I would ask, what kind of studies do you have behind you when you post a thing like that? Is that your opinion, your philosophical, very introspective opinion, or is it just something else, like we have to save Mexico, not become Colombia, which is something totally different? Cannabis will still have the same effect, no matter if it's legalized or decriminalized or like it is today. This is not the subject. The subject is, should people use cannabis? Or could our society cope with cannabis or cannabinoids in young humans' cognitive system? No, it can't. Because you need to be aware of your own personal development. You need to make decisions on your own. So What we can say today is that if 100 persons are using cannabis once, or maybe twice or 3 times, because they are not good enough to inhale, and they get a high. About 30% of those who get a high say, this is good. And 70% say, no, I do not want to do this because I lose my inner control, and I don't want to lose my inner control. Because that's what you do. The cannabinoids act on the GABA system, which means that you fragment the neuropsychological network and lose your inner control, which is not very good when you are in 14 to 16 years of age, because then you have to rely on auto control, like people you know, parents, teachers, and so on, because you are not able to build up an own inner control of your own. So I think the legalization should be discussed on another agenda, because cannabinoids are always interacting in your system, and if you will legalize it, probably more people will use it, and this is not good. But as I said in the beginning, we have no studies showing this, so it's like a Russian roulette to play. And putting this question back to those who argue is, okay, we lose one generation, but then we will come into a more normalized way of using it. And I said, that's your kid, that's my kid, it's your neighbor's kid. We are going to lose. For what? And I think they need to produce more serious studies in order to bring some light into what they think they are going to make out of it in order to legalize.
Okay.
They use it as medicine. Cannabis cannot be used as medicine. Some preparations in the cannabinoid register are possible uses for pain, pathological pain, and other medicines are more potent that we have already have. So this is the medical aspects are not an arena to argue for legalization.
Okay, we thank you very much. You have been listening to Associate Professor Thomas Lundqvist at Lund University talking about cannabis.